Bloomberg. For more on the budget battle, let's bring in Dean Baker, co-founder of the Center for Economic Research and Policy. He joins us from Washington. Dean, welcome back to Bottom Line. Pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me on.
Sir, President Obama and House Speaker John Boehner, they're in agreement on one thing. Both say the United States isn't facing an immediate debt crisis. Are they right? And will Congress eventually reverse the $85 billion in automatic spending cuts that went into effect on March 1st?
Well, the first part's much easier to answer than the second. Clearly, they're right. I mean, the markets are telling us as clearly as possible the interest rate on long-term debt, 10-year government bonds, is hovering a little bit below 2%. I mean, if we're facing a debt crisis, the markets haven't seemed to notice that. Clearly, markets are willing to lend us large amounts of money at very low interest rates. Now, the other part, will they reverse the sequester? My guess is they probably will come to some agreements on at least reversing parts of it because, I think it's fair to say almost no one likes the sequester in its current form. So you'll probably get some nibbling around the edges. But in terms of reversing the bulk of these spending cuts, my guess, for better or worse, and I would say for worse, you probably won't see that.
Dean, over the past 3 months, Congress will have avoided an across-the-board income tax increase, prevented the nation's default on its debt, and sidestepped a government shutdown. And this is by legislating to the least common denominator. What will the country have to show for all of this if it comes to pass?
Well, I can't say a lot. I mean, to my mind, I continue to look at the state of the economy, and the big problem is that we're still way below our potential. By the Congressional Budget Office estimates, our output's about $1 trillion below where it should be. And no one's prepared to really talk about how we could boost the economy. I shouldn't quite say no one, because there was a budget that came out of the Congressional Progressive Caucus that did talk about a jobs plan, a stimulus package, but I think everyone knows that's not likely to pass. So I think they could say we prevented a catastrophe, which is, of course, good news, but in terms of getting the economy back to full employment, that doesn't seem to be on the horizon or really on anyone's agenda at this point.
Dean, can Congress reach a grand bargain on the budget if the White House and Democrats insist on more taxes and the Republicans insist on entitlement reform? Where's the compromise?
It's hard to see at this point. Again, the Democrats, I can't imagine President Obama agreeing to a budget that doesn't include substantial amount of new revenue. On the other hand, Speaker Boehner seems to draw a line in the sand on that. And again, they're demanding cuts to Social Security and Medicare. The Democrats will go along, no doubt, with cuts to Medicare if they mean cuts in payments to the drug companies and other providers. But if you're talking about hitting beneficiaries and cutting Social Security, that will be a harder sell.
Well, Dean, one of the ways Republicans are seeking what they call a down payment on the debt is the repeal of the Affordable Care Laws. Our Peter Cook was just telling us. Is that even realistic, given that the Supreme Court has upheld the constitutionality of the law?
This is really an impossibility. I mean, look, the Democrats pushed very, very hard on that. President Obama really staked his presidency on it, and yes, it's gone through the Supreme Court. The Republicans know there's no way they're going to give ground on that, and it's going to go into effect in 9 months, or I should say the bulk of it will, and we're going to see how that works. And if the Republicans are confident it's going to be this disaster, no doubt they'll have a lot of support for repealing it at that point. But it's very hard to see. We got 9 months to go until we start to see those exchanges kick into place. It's very hard to see anyone backing down on that at this point.
Dean, we have about a minute left. Are an overhaul of the tax code and comprehensive immigration reform, are they the path toward meaningful bipartisan cooperation on the debt?
Well, I think we will see something on immigration reform. There's a lot of movement there, and there's a lot of bipartisan agreement between the parties. And again, there's breakdowns within both parties, but I think we will see something on that. Tax reform will be harder. I don't know if that means, an agreement on the debt. I mean, again, I think we've had this blown up and created basically a phony crisis. We don't have to do anything on the debt. That's what the markets are trying to tell us. So we've had this, chase for a grand bargain, which I would say kind of an illusion. It's like the great white whale. We don't have to get that.
Dean Baker, he is the co-founder of the Center for Economic Policy and Research, joining us from our bureau in Washington. Dean, always good to get your perspective. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.